I may lose my voice a little bit.
I think I'll start. Yeah. Good morning. Good morning. Welcome everyone to BSides 2018. Our first speaker, RJ, he's got some interesting stuff which I think everybody's going to really enjoy. He's found a vulnerability in Zestimate, which is the online appraising algorithm for Zillow. And by that way, he can actually artificially inflate or deflate housing prices. So he's going to be speaking to us about this interesting scenario, and he'll walk us through. Welcome, RJ.
Cool. Thank you, guys. All right. Whoops, let me run here. There we go. All right. Can everybody hear me okay, so I don't have to walk around with the mic thing? We good? In the back? Okay. If I start to get low and you can't hear me, just say something, you're good. Heckling allowed, all that good stuff. It's a hacker conference, right? So we're going to have some fun. All right. So today we're going to talk about exploiting Zillow Zestimate. Who's buying, selling a home right now or considering it? Okay, because this is entirely for you. Okay, because this is really fun stuff. So for anybody that was here expecting the fire system talk that I was originally going to do, we had to change that because of the nature of what we found. So ultimately, we kind of had to shift that off a little bit. So hopefully at some point we can talk about it, but for right now we got to move forward with something else. So anyways, that being said, let's get into this and start talking about Zillow. If you don't know, Zillow, their Zestimate is an appraisal thing online. So when you're looking for houses, it's pretty popular. It's probably the most popular platform for, people that are looking to buy or sell a home or even to rent a house, right? So ultimately, this is going to walk you through some steps and some things you can do. We have reached out to Zillow and gotten some postcard responses and nothing, no real good feedback from them. However, that being said, the initial time that I ran this and automated it, essentially they took down their servers for 2 days and did some changes, which just basically required me to do a little more scripting, right? So it's still there. It's still available. You can do it right away. And matter of fact, I did some recent examples just so you guys could have some fun. I encourage you to do it because we've talked to them and they didn't really want to do anything about it. So I hope you guys make some money. This is definitely a good way for opportunities for you to make some extra money if you're buying and selling in your area. So yeah, hopefully you guys get rich or something cool comes from it. All right, so strategy here, we're just going into the Zillow's, their website. You can just go, it's just Zillow.com. And you want to search for houses. So ultimately what happened was when I originally went out and figured this out and found it, we basically found that you could do it with any house. It didn't matter. As long as the house isn't claimed, you could do it. However, now to list the house, one of the changes they made when they brought the servers down, to list the house, you actually have to put in a certain amount of information. So if you're an MLS or you're a real estate broker and you list a house, you have to put in that information. You have to tie it to yourself. Once it's tied to you, you're the only one that can get rid of that ownership. Okay? So ultimately, this is kind of double fold because it's kind of a funny thing because once you become an owner, they have to change it at Zillow, or you have to decline being the owner anymore. So that's something, that you have to consider that, if it's posted right now for sale, you're going to have a hard time, grabbing those houses for yourself. There's a couple ways to do that, but ultimately you want to look for houses that are off the market because they pretty much list every house that's, that they can find into their machine or whatever. So now you just want to go find that house that you want. Cause you guys, you want to go own a house, right? Cause owning it you guys all deserve it. You want that $1 million house, right? You guys should. You should go out and get that $1 million house. I encourage you to do so. So the field forms right here are really important. There's a couple of things. There's two ways we can go about this. The first is if you go and you find a house that hasn't been claimed yet, you can put in anything. Doesn't matter. You can put in, Papa Smurf, whatever your handle is or whatever you want it to be called. You can claim it under anybody you want. You know what I mean? Green leprechauns, whatever. Put in a phone number. As long as it's a, normal, U.S. phone number, it'll take it. So you can put that in there. Doesn't really matter. It doesn't have to be tied to anything. Now, from that, you can do a lot of things, okay, that we'll get into. There's the other path where they made the change when they brought down the servers that now connects out, and you'll actually have to use the owner's name, okay? So it's just these fields, and then you just hit accept and submit. Now you've successfully owned a home. It's that simple. So I'm glad you guys can go out and purchase a home today for free, and really enjoy the fact that you're now homeowners. And we can do all kinds of fun stuff from there. So now, depending on what track you took, you'll kind of have some ways to deal with that, and it really is that simple. All right, so now from putting in false information, so, Papa Smurf, whatever, you put that information in, you can actually make edits to that home. So now, you don't really like somebody, and you really want to mess with them, and, now I'm just going to claim their house because they didn't claim it, because that guy was just really not nice to me. And ultimately, now you can go pretty much edit their pictures, right? So I can put all kinds of weird pictures, inappropriate stuff. I can, list, videos, they're really not conducive for them selling their home or actually their value of their house. I mean, you can pretty much, whatever you dream up, you can do, all right? So that gets more tricky on the seller side. We'll get to that in a minute, and that's where you have to get into the owner information. All right, so here's just an example. We can just go in here and we can edit facts, right? I could change what your house is, you know what I mean? It's a pyramid shape, and it's got 55 rooms, and it pretty much whatever you want it to be. So you can create your own house from here. You can pretty much go in here and change it up however you want at this point. You're pretty much capable of doing it, designing your house from scratch and changing all the pictures and changing how that person at, 1700, Fishhawk Boulevard is chilling. So, ultimately we can make a lot of cool edits here, and we can change, we can give a video walkthrough, you know what I mean? It's your favorite SOCOM video that you got there. You throw that up there, it's just going to be a walk through a house, right? Just clearing it out. It's going to be right here. And so, so it gets even better because you can upload all kinds of media and stuff like that, and, change some different facts about the house and really cool pictures, because everybody wants to have a nicer house, right? You can do this to your own home, change up the pictures on here, make people really interested in it. All right. So, now we go into the little bit harder part. So the rendering and selling part of it gets to be a little more convoluted. So ultimately, we run into a couple of issues when we are renting and selling. And ultimately, the reason that I'm not going to post any pictures on here is because you have to actually pull from property record search, right? So because of that, because it's a public record, buying and selling homes, you can go and you can find addresses of people that actually own that home, okay? So the lesson here is that if you own a home, go on Zillow tonight before everybody else in the room does it for you. Go in there and take ownership of that home under your name. Now here's the catch. You have to have the first and last name of the owner, or one of the owners if there's multiple owners, because they're doing a cross-check against public records database, which you can go out to. Now, doing this, you will, have to agree to terms of public records and disclosure and usage and all those kind of things. So do be cautious and forewarned that this is something that you need to make sure you read all the legal doctrine for that county. It does get to be, in a lot of cases, replicated around county. So certain counties and areas don't have the same rules, laws, and regulations and user agreements, right? There is consistencies there, but ultimately you want to do that before you actually start taking people's names. So if I'm just observing and I'm looking at properties because it's interesting and it's public record, well, maybe that's okay. Do be cautious when you do automation around this, because that is usually something that becomes, kind of the gray area that moves a little further than gray maybe. So just be aware of that. Now, you need their first and last name. You don't need middle name, you don't need middle initial, you just need that information. It's pretty easy to script out and pull with Selenium or JavaScript or something. So ultimately, once you have that, now you need a phone. To sell the house, you're going to have a phone. What's really cool about this, though, if you're not familiar with it, is that there are a lot of phone APIs, especially with Android, where you can automate phone calls. And you can automate using, pounds and commas within those automated, APIs that allow you to basically input that data. So when somebody calls, so say you buy a burner phone, you tie it to a Google number, and you're using it only for this, you can basically script it out so that it's going to call that phone. You're going to put in that information, it'll call that phone. And then from there, you can do all the nice little steps, and it's all automated. All right, so now we got to set a listing price. Okay, we'll get a little more phone details here in a minute, but ultimately we have now taken ownership of this house. For Bill and Jane Smith, this is now our house, and we're going to take it. But you know what? We're really looking at this, and we're not really happy with our idea, so we're gonna sell it. Okay, and so this is the really fun part, because now I want to sell your house that you own, because I own it now, and I'm going to sell it for $1 million, because that just sounds fun, right? It's a good number. Now, the cool thing is that you actually don't have to change this value much. If you put it at $1 billion, you may get, them to kick it back to you or something. So ultimately, just pick a normal number, because what's awesome about this whole thing is we can change this in the end. And what's actually affecting the Zestimate is not necessarily this value, but is the value that we get to when we get rid of this house. So now we've taken ownership, we put it on the market for a certain price. I encourage you, if you're going to do this for large areas and you're going to automate it, to make sure that you put it, just this value right here, inflate it just a little bit, okay? Because that way, if you put all of them, list them all at $1 million, then they'll probably bring it down, shut it down, all that kind of stuff. So if you just do it a little bit high, we're going to get into the fact that you can list all of them for that price, and then when you sell them off, we can change that price at the end, and that's what's actually affecting the Zestimate. So here we can put in whatever price you really want to, and have no problems with that. All right, so the phone call. Now, you will have to do a couple of things when you automate this out, right? And the big one is that you're going to have to, when that phone call comes in, it takes about 5 minutes, 3 to 5 minutes for those phone calls to start coming in, once you submit for a listing. So you need to put the proper delays in when you're doing the scripting and stuff, so that the phone's not getting multiple calls at the same time. Okay? So by doing that, now you take the API, you add the one, character, you basically hit a pound, and then it's a 1. For the APIs around Android, and then you will need to verify some information, and it'll be a recording, and it'll ask you some information. Fortunately, these new cool phones and stuff that we have allow us to basically take phone calls if we know a predicted statement's going to be made. So because we know the predicted statements in our trial and error that what they're going to be, we can now add in the details of what we expect. This is around the property that you purchased. So the purchase, the house that you selected, we're going to import that once we do the automation into our script, so that when we get this phone call that we're expecting, that we add in the zip code for that property that it's going to be calling us about, that we know the room numbers for that home. Okay? Now, consistently, as of right now, the room numbers relate to the rooms in the house and not the total rooms, because there's 2 different values in there. Okay, so right now you just need the room numbers. What they should do is make it a little bit harder, and it's going to ask you for total room or room numbers, but they haven't done that yet. So hopefully down the road they'll get wise up and make sure it's down. So don't list it for $1 billion. Usually not super successful with that, at least from the automated side. It's just one of those things where, for some reason, I think they have it sends off a verification over when it gets over a certain amount right now. That did not used to be the case. That's more current. And so just make sure that when you're listing, that you don't have to, this is not affecting the Zestimate, so your end inflation and deflation is not actually occurring yet. So hold off on making it too big, right? All right, so this is an example listing. Hopefully I didn't give you too much information, but you probably could find it if you did. Anyway, so this is the listing beforehand, all right? I want you to pay attention really, really closely to a couple of things. It's off market, okay? It's off market, and ultimately we have a Zestimate for this home, okay? We have rental payments, and we can manipulate rental payments and stuff like that as well. The Zestimate, though, is where we're really targeting. This is the thing. This is the value of the house. This is what, influences stuff. And appraisers ultimately have bias, right? So they look at these tools and things like that, and this is inherently creating bias. And I've talked to a lot of real estate agents locally in the Tampa area, and a couple of friends, on different coasts. And ultimately, they don't necessarily use it to do their appraisal values, but ultimately what happens is they run into it and they use it for an assessment tool to look at how properties are listed and what they're buying and selling for. And so because of this, though they have other ways in MLS listings that they use priority-wise, that bias comes into play because it is used incredibly, significant amounts of the time in current population. So real estate agents use it. Buyers and sellers use it. This is a great place to go find homes and to look. It's really easy. It's got it all there. It's pulling all the information. It's got the schools. It's got the districts. It's got all this information for us. So ultimately, it creates this bias, and this bias is in the appraiser's valuation, in most cases, because they can't help but be aware that this exists. And then it also creates bias when people are going to list their homes for buy owner or use a real estate agent, because they've looked at Zillow, they've looked at this information. And this is really the frustrating part, is when you reach out to them and you tell them, like, look guys, I know that you're trying to do something here automated, but ultimately the bias that it creates and some of the implications that are around it that will influence the market today, because all of you will be affected, whether you're renting or buying or selling or whatever. Every person in this room is going to have some effect from this. Okay? So ultimately, you inherently using this as a tool and you inflating it, say a real estate agent does it, right? They change the valuations of the things in their area so that they can have different conversations when they're talking to home buyers and sellers. Okay? So I want you to pay attention to this number. It's 156, 196, okay? All right, so we've now listed our house, okay? So as you can see, this house is now the $1 million that we inputted, okay? So now we have listed our house for $1 million. What's really, really cool is that right away, and just so you know, this process that you would think to take, because if you listen to the phone call and all that kind of stuff and all the details to it, it tells you, it's going to take 72 hours to complete and all this kind of stuff. No, it takes the total process is less than 5 minutes. Okay? For each house. Okay? So each time you do this, less than 5 minutes. I've gotten it lower than that, but sometimes without the proper delays, there's overlap. But ultimately, now we've listed our house for sale. So now we're selling our house, actually your house, and I'm selling that for $1 million, all right? So now, so far, dude, this is literally this was taken, I want to say maybe a minute, maybe 2 or 3 minutes after this listing was posted. All right, so I have 14 views already. 14 people have already viewed it. Okay? At my new $1 million house. Right now, I'm ranked number 1 on views. So I'm getting some heavy hits, right? So everybody's looking at this now. So in that area, they're like, man, where's this new listing? It's $1 million, for this 3.2. Whew. All right, so now from here, I've got my house for sale. Now let's sell that sucker, right? Because you know what? If somebody's going to pay me $1 million for it, hey, you know what? It doesn't even matter if they're going to pay me for $1 million for it, because I'm going to sell this thing right now for $1 million as far as Zillow is concerned. So I go in there, I clicked, you know what? I don't want to list this thing anymore. I'm just going to sell it, all right? So it's not pending anything. I'm going to sell it today, a minute after I just listed it, all right? Okay? And this is where the inflate part comes in, which is really, really funny. So, or fun, or interesting, I don't know. But anyways, this is the value that's actually going to matter, okay? And that's the sold part, okay? So now, I put in what I sold it for. It's an optional thing, but that's what actually affects the Zestimate. So now, I inflated this house to $2 million because, they were looking, right? So, they were really interested. They wanted this 3.2 so bad that they're like, you know what, $1 million, I'm not even going to wait. I'm going to get this for $2 million, all right? All right, cool. Congratulations on selling your house, man. You just sold your house, your first sale, all right? So now that you got, this under your belt, now you've got an actual house sold. You're good to go, right? So now you sold your first house. Now I'm going to become a real estate agent because that's just, that's where all the money is, right? So, security field, whatever, but I'm sorry, we're going to have to go into real estate now. So as you can see, now that we've sold our house for $2 million, this awesome 3.2, right? I want you to pay particular attention, and if you didn't write it down, just so you know, we'll go back to it real quick. So I sold this in a matter of minutes. I listed and sold it. I sold it for $2 million. And so ultimately, here's the caveat to the Zestimates. It takes a little bit of time for them to catch up. So initially, you're going to just have a little bit of inflation. Or deflation if you sell your house low, right? So if you're selling all the houses in the area low, you will have a little bit of a deflation. Okay, so somebody you really don't like, they're going to sell their house, you want to deflate that value in that market, let's do this, right? So you can do all kinds of nefarious fun things just by their little way that they handle their Zestimate. Now, if you look at this value for the Zestimate, we have just inflated this value because we sold this house, okay? Now, we didn't inflate it much because it was 156, 159 or something. Let's see where we're at. 156, 196, and then now that we've sold it, we had a little inflation, right? Now, it takes a little bit of time to catch up, but what ultimately ends up happening, if you do this to multiple properties, is this value for Zestimate rises exponentially. So over time, once it starts doing its calculations for its, its algorithm, which we reached out to them and asked them like, hey, look, your algorithm's off and this whatever and blah, blah, blah. And they, basically sent back a postcard answer, and then we sent them another email, and they're, came back and were pretty rude about it. And then we were like, okay, well, so this is the example, and then they brought down the servers and all that kind of stuff. So as you can see, they effectively, successfully fixed the problem, right? So, I mean, they did a really good job. They tied it to the property owner. So now everything's fixed. So we can't actually do this anymore, right? Wait, no, I did this yesterday. So anyway, so now we can see that we got some inflation, right? So now we've sold our house, now let's go sell some others, right? So ultimately, we got to look at some of the implications of what's going on. We have some serious concerns right now when we're talking about real estate because this affects all of us. I can do this and I can basically put this out on the market and I can automate this and I can inflate all the values in the entire market in my area or deflate them depending on what I'm trying to do. If I'm going to buy, well, I'm just going to deflate the entire market and everybody's going to think it's less than what I'm going to do. I'm going to get myself a $20,000 score, right? So I'm going to get myself a discount on that house that I'm going to go buy. So you buyers and sellers, opportunities, right? Ultimately, yeah, so we're looking at this and then we got to look at a couple of things. So always check the property records and the language that they have in there for their legal stance before you start doing this. Happens to be a couple of areas that don't really have a lot of legal stance in their verbiage and the agreements for the property record search, and hence the areas that I picked to give you this example. Now we got to talk about some other things. So I've talked again to a lot of real estate and people in the area and actual appraisers, and they admitted that, look, there's real bias in this. So there's a lot of news out there and a lot of information out there that tells you that Zillow, it's not perfect, it's not concise, but they're selling it as that tool, right? They're telling you that it is. They're trying to make the impression, the bias within the community that use their tool, use Zillow's Zestimate to get the best idea of what you want to buy in the area and all that kind of stuff. When ultimately we can do, this to it and we can change those markets accordingly for our interests. And this goes to real estate investors or people that are renting properties, because not everybody is, good, American patriots like ourselves looking out for the best interest of all the little people, right? There's bad people out there, usually CEOs, all those high-level people that, only worried about the bottom dollar, right? They'll do something like this to the regular public, right? I mean, we're not going to do that because we're ethical, moral people in this room, and we're looking out for everybody else, and that's why we're security professionals. So, anyway, so then we get into Zillow's, their language and all that kind of stuff. And ultimately, with Zillow's language, you can pretty much do this with no problem and not violate their user agreement, which is even better because now they don't even have any legal stance for anything you're doing, right? So you can do this all legally. This is not like, you can claim houses and stuff. You can even go in there and claim a house because I'm just representing the property owner, which even gets you in less trouble, right? So there's ways to even within this to get around all of those user agreements and things like that. The one thing that they put in there, and the reason that the code is not going to be posted on GitHub today, unfortunately, is that ultimately it comes down to you can't do automation against their website. Okay? So if I put it in as much as I want to for you guys as fun, and maybe somebody else will and send out an email that they did so, but ultimately, it's not going to come from me at any point. Basically so that this is, something that they could actually come after you for. So the automation part of it, that's something that they put in the language of their user agreements, and that would be a violation. However, we're trying to figure out, and so fortunately I have friends that are lawyers and we can have these conversations at this point, is to basically figure out, well, okay, so what? I violated Zillow's user agreement. Whip-de-doo. Like, what are they going to do to me? Like, what, are they going to kick me off their platform? I wasn't using my real name anyways. Like, So ultimately, this stuff's super easy. Actually, like scripting it out is incredibly easy. It's way easier than you would ever expect. And even if you're new to the industry and security and stuff like that, this is a really good first project. You know what I mean? The potential to make some money is there. And I mean, as you get in the security field, you need that money to, you want to be that, supreme analyst and stuff. And so this is a good place to, make sure you can pay the bills while you do the security research that you want to do, right? So ultimately, this has been tried in inflation. I did not do it myself, I assure you, or I wouldn't be up here standing doing it. But I did let some people know about it in the community because they found it really interesting and stuff. And somebody was able to inflate the value of their property and see if there was actual implications of it. The ultimate thing that they found out was that they made 20 grand off of this. They had a vacant property. It was in an area that was kind of could use a little uptick. It looked like it was a vibrant opportunity to raise things up, and they made some money. So ultimately, I encourage you guys to be safe and responsible security people. But ultimately, the opportunities to not really violate any laws if you're respectful of some of the things here that we talked about today. And then now you can go ahead and, get that money that you need to be a security researcher and professional, right? All right, so we're kind of at the end. Questions? I can run you actually through the Zillow stuff. I know we have quite a bit of time blocked off. Again, the other talk was going to be pretty extensive and possibly do demos, but we had to kind of scratch that given some of the implications because, they were receptive. So most security companies, if you find a vulnerability, they are actually pretty receptive. So reach out to them first. It's the right thing to do, and usually there are fringe benefits to that. So, obviously, those are the things. But, I mean, mostly because we're good patriots, right? All right.
Did you put validation checks, like you put like a negative 1 million in there?
So they have a few. In that case, no. Okay? They have a few. As a web platform, they use most of, the tools to do testing on input validation stuff. So it's not super, there are a couple, okay? I thought about listing them here, but then I was like, the nature of what I'm doing here, and if I start listing some of that kind of stuff, then, this is probably going to call some attention at some point. And since I'm getting videotaped, I figured that I wouldn't talk too much about input validation and stuff. But there's some really good opportunities right there, especially in their blog areas, because you can do a lot of injections and stuff in the blog areas that give you opportunities to do really cool things to manipulate the market and tell people about the values within those areas. So ultimately, there's a lot of cool things that you can do because of what they've missed, right? Go ahead.
The way that I'm seeing this, I could see this being much more effective in a cash sale. Because if you're trying to sell a property and then you go apply for a mortgage, the mortgage company is going to go through the public records for the comps. But in a situation where you're doing a cash sale and it's just an individual person that is looking at the tools available to them, then that could have a much higher impact.
Right. So that's
and regarding that as well, you don't really need that many recent comps in a neighborhood most of the time, so it might not be something that needs to be automated. If you do...
Well, right. It's pretty fast to do this by hand, and you would need to automate it out, and then you're not violating anything, right? No user agreement, something like that. So
three or four comps within a 4 or 5 month period makes it relevant to sales to really ought to be.
Yeah, no, it's definitely applicable there, But there again, it's going to impact somebody in some way by doing that, right? Hopefully, it looks like you're going to get, be well off this evening as well, so that's good.
Isn't there some functionality where you can go in and correct information about your home? And is there a way to just say, hey, I got an appraisal and this is what came with that?
Yeah, so ultimately the problem with that is, yes, you can do that if you're the actual owner of the home. However, I've already claimed ownership as the homeowner, and now I've got you using an email and a phone number that's not associated with your account, so you have to reach out to Zillow directly, and you have to work with Zillow to get that information changed so that they're contacting and changing you, and they're going to validate your information. So ultimately, yes, they can go back and retroactively change it. It just takes some time.
Well, rather than doing all of this to inflate the value, couldn't you just directly inflate it by saying you got an appraisal for $3 million?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you submitted it as a user, though, they're probably going to go and do some validation checking, right? Because they have people that probably sit on the back end to do that, depending on how much you're relating to value. But they're not really receptive to that. So they've been, like some of the emails that we've sent to try to discuss some of this stuff, they're not very receptive about it. They basically just say, oh, we're working on it, and blah, 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 and it's too bad. We're not going to take any input from you right now.
So what do you think they should do?
I think they should get rid of Zestimate, because I don't think that's a way to safely construct your user right now. Until they figure out the algorithms and how they tie that to the regular markets and what's actually bought and sold, they need to take it down. And that was my recommendation to them.
They only use like public records of how much the house sold for it.
Yeah, I mean, they're pulling, so you can either manipulate on that side, but ultimately, yeah, they're using pulling from public records and that's what they're doing. I mean, they could ultimately change all the functionality so you can't actually access it. In other words, you can't buy and sell it. Yeah, they don't want to do that. That's not profitable.
Verify the mail what it's to do.
Do you examine any other platforms when you're on the campus, like Land Watcher or like
So no, I haven't, and I'm sure that the same problem exists. Truvia, those, yeah, I mean, 100%. Yeah, this is going to be not just a Zillow problem. This is going to be anytime you get in person.
platform problem.
Yeah. You're trying to get users to do something, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, 100%. Really, like, I was able, depending on what I was selling the houses at, get the market rate worse. So it's much easier to make that value in housing if you do it in California. So if I was anything in housing, I can see, $8,000. If I'm doing that,
Yeah, we're just,
then I'm only seeing increase. Properties and right off the similarity in the area.
Okay, cool. Great.
The algorithm that Zillow uses is not correctly trying to certain divisions like the rent and things like that. It's the old true zip code. And so that's how their algorithms are using something that they, probably fix that.
Switches everywhere. So, California versus
Yeah, right. Because they use that